Who can take a flower, roll it up and make it fine? Sprinkle it with knowledge and a little bit of time. Cover it with headlines and a sweet euphoria too. Cannabis man can. Who can take a story and make it feel so grand? Spread the word around about the wonders of this land. Mix it all with laughter and a sprinkle of insight. Cannabis man flies. Ooh, Cannabis man, spreading news and joy across the land. Diving deep into the growing green. Cannabis man, we're all king. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, yeah. Cannabis man, spreading news and joy across the land. Diving deep into the growing green. Cannabis man, we're all king. Ooh, yeah. Ooh, yeah.
Ooh, yeah. Welcome into another episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Thank you so much for clicking on the show. I am your host, Don Kleppen. And if it's your first time here, welcome in. Thanks for joining us. This is a show where we're trying to take a journalistic look at all things cannabis. As the landscape for legal cannabis is changing all the time, every day around the world, and especially here in the United States, I wanted to start this show so that I could have conversations with experts in the field, if they are researchers who are looking into the questions we still have about cannabis, if they're entrepreneurs, business owners who've created a product or service in this new legal space, or if they are government leaders, policymakers who have been elected or appointed in legal states to make the laws that are going to be the foundations of legal cannabis going forward. I like talking with all these people in the space. It's very exciting, and there's a lot of exciting news that I like to bring to you as well as perspective from my vantage point here as somebody who's been a personal cannabis user for about 20 years or so. And I also do broadcasting here in the Chicago area where I am right now, downtown. I do traffic for iHeartRadio and I do news for WGN Radio. And I'm going to be returning to my news chair at WGN this Saturday, the 18th, from when I'm recording this. You can hear me during House Smarts with Lou Manfredini, and I'm really looking forward to getting back to that. Even though the hour that I start is ungodly early, I have missed those guys. I really enjoy doing news for such a storied station, and I've been itching to get back to it. But there's some really big news today that I want to share with you, national news here in the U.S., and obviously this has implications globally. This has to do with the move to reschedule cannabis under the Controlled Substances Act down from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. And there's a major development on that front that just came out earlier today. I've also got some Illinois news stories, some stuff local here that I love to get to in the Illinois News Joint Wrap. I'm also going to be talking about some financial projections for legal cannabis, as well as another state that has gotten enough signatures to consider whether to legalize cannabis, and that question will be on its November ballot. I will get to that state later. I also have some no-nos, some not-so-great news regarding cannabis, mainly cannabis influencers. And I say that with air quotes. A couple of examples of things maybe not to do, as well as somebody who you really should not be listening to, at least where cannabis is concerned. I'm going to get to all of that and more in this episode. If you haven't already, please leave a rating or a review for this show. However you're listening, if this is on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube, whatever you used to access this show, there is some function to leave a rating or review, and I really appreciate everyone who's done it so far, and if you haven't yet, do me a favor and leave one as soon as you can. Also, follow the show at C-Man Podcast on X and Instagram, and it's the Cannabis Man Podcast Facebook and YouTube pages. And you can always become a subscriber by scrolling down and clicking the Support the Show link in the description notes. That'll take you to a Buzzsprout page. You can subscribe to the show there and offer some support, and if you do that, I will send you a thank you email email, and I'll read your name out in the credits of the next episode, because then you do your part to support the show, and I really can't tell you how much I appreciate that. And of course, you can also text any thoughts you have or a question you might have into the show simply by scrolling down and clicking on the Text Cannabis Man link right at the top of the description notes of this episode. So let's get into this episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Here we go.
This is Tommy Chong, and you're listening to the Cannabis broadcast.
Alrighty, and now we're into the show. I mentioned at the top this fan mail feature that I just activated last week. That's the text link that you can use to contact the show, and I've already had a few people utilize it, but there's one message that I got from San Antonio, Texas, 8307. The message reads, listening to this, his reference to Budweiser, it is not the same in every state. In Oklahoma, it cannot be over 3%. In other states, it's 5%. So his state-to-state references are wrong! Exclamation point. Thank you, 8307. I appreciate the message, and you're right. That's something that I've made the comparison to alcohol a lot through this show, and I appreciate the notion that alcohol's not regulated the same in every state either. Some states are drier than others. You've got states like Utah where most of the counties there are dry, and you've got states like Oklahoma where just the threshold for legal alcohol products is lower than in states like Illinois or certainly Wisconsin, where many of the alcohol laws are really just throwing your hands in the air in a nice shrug, and it's encouraging more drinking. I love hanging out in Wisconsin, especially having a drink there. The only state, I believe, with a state cocktail, which is the brandy old-fashioned. Love those going over the border to Wisconsin, and I really appreciate you in San Antonio for listening to the show and for messaging in. Any kind of feedback like that, I love it, and so I just wanted to bring that to you, and I'll keep that in mind going forward with the alcohol comparisons, because cannabis, as I say, I want cannabis to be treated more like alcohol, but you can see that when the federal government legalized alcohol, they didn't really establish their own policy aside from the 0.08 legal limit and all of that. Even that is really just a state-by-state thing. The federal government just got out of the way and allowed states to do their own thing. That is truly what I want to happen with cannabis as well. And as the texter from Texas mentioned, different states do alcohol differently too, and I think that's going to be the case with cannabis, and I really look forward to that happening. And there's some news on that front that I'll get to later, but first, I want to get into the News Joint Wrap. That's right, this is a wrap-up of news stories and events relating to cannabis in and around Illinois, and it's all curated for you by IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Think of it as the joint you can hit for all your Illinois cannabis news and reviews. And let's start with a Senate Bill 3940 that was introduced by Senator Kimberly Lightford, and this has several miscellaneous cannabis regulations concerning craft growers, taxes, financial assistance, and more. Jason Brown, who started Illinois News Joint, wrote this article, and he's got a lot of great information in here and a little bit of a rundown of some of the provisions that are in this Senate bill. Craft grow changes, they include the repeal of provisions establishing cultivator taxes and craft grower taxes and a shared premises pilot program. The provision for the shared premises program states, quote, the Department of Agriculture shall create a pilot program that shall allow craft growers to share premises with cultivation centers. The department shall adopt rules that a craft grower may only locate within 1,500 feet of another craft grower or cultivation center upon approval by the department, and that multiple craft growers may share within a single cultivation center. A craft grower may not share premises with another craft grower outside of a cultivation center, end quote. The Department of Agriculture will also adopt rules by January 1st of next year, 2025, that another craft grow provision includes rules concerning the application of pesticides, stating within 1 year after the effective date of this amendatory of the 103rd General Assembly, the department shall adopt prohibiting the application of pesticides to cannabis in the flowering stage in a craft grower facility, end quote. That would be lovely. A couple of things to break down in there. One of them is this 1,500 feet provision where craft growers may not be within 1,500 feet of each other. That is something that has had ripple effects already. I've talked about downtown in Chicago where there was a big move to make the old Rainforest Cafe, turn that into a dispensary, which I still love the idea for. However, that had to be squashed because there were already too many cannabis cultivation centers and dispensaries within 1,500 feet of that zone. And the amount that was already there prevented the Rainforest Cafe from becoming another one. And there are many, many other examples like that here in the state. There's lots of space in Illinois, and God knows that places outside the Chicago area, central and southern Illinois, need more options in terms of dispensaries and cultivation centers. And I also get that, not all the leaders of these different towns and villages and provinces and stuff, I get that not everybody wants to have cannabis dispensaries on every street corner, and I think that is part of where this initial provision popped up, limiting the amount that can be within a certain space of each other. And we all know that location is a valuable commodity when you're starting a business. And so if there is a desirable location, a lot of dispensary owners and cultivators are going to want to set up shop there because it's going to foot traffic and just maybe right off of a busy street or intersection. That's going to lead you, at least in theory, to more customers and more business. And just like with bars or with casinos or with any business, even gas stations and fast food restaurants and whatnot, outside of malls and mini malls, you don't really want to see a congregation of the same business all in the same area. It just doesn't look great. We do want options as consumers. We do want more. Competition brings prices down and all of that, but that's not really what I'm talking about here. Senate Bill 3940 would also require the Department of Agriculture to license cannabis laboratories, stating, quote, the Department of Agriculture may suspend or revoke the license of or impose other penalties upon cannabis testing facilities, cultivation centers, craft growers, infusers, transport organizations, their principal officers, agents in charge, and agents for violations of this act and any rules adopted under this act. And then there's more regarding the Retailer's Occupation Tax Act and other taxes regarding cultivator and craft grower licenses. I won't get into the weeds of those. I've already gotten into more specifics than I intended to here, but I've shared this article below and I encourage you to read the entirety of it. Lot of great information here and elsewhere at IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Another such article has to do with the Medical Cannabis Advisory Board. They recommended a new debilitating condition for qualifying medical patients. IDPH and MCAB hosted its third meeting Monday of this week, May 13th, and the virtual board meeting ran from 3 to 5 p.m. that day and discussed whether or not to include 4 more new qualifying debilitating conditions for medical cannabis patients in Illinois. Those would be ovarian cyst, polycystic ovarian syndrome, uterine fibroid, and generalized anxiety. And after taking anonymous preliminary votes to add 2 qualifying debilitating conditions, which were endometriosis and female orgasmic disorder, that was back in March, that meeting, the board then moved to add the descriptor painful in front of ovarian cyst for a second vote, and then ultimately voted 8-3 to include ovarian cyst as a qualifying condition, and then the discussion to consider polycystic ovarian syndrome as a qualifying condition. That seemed to divide the board members, according to Jason Brown. And they ultimately voted 5-4 with 2 abstentions to not recommend polycystic ovarian syndrome as a condition. And then after that spirited debate, the board did not have time left to discuss adding uterine fibroid and generalized anxiety. Those have been tabled until the next board meeting, which is scheduled for June 10th, so a little less than a month from now. But medical patients in Illinois now have ovarian cyst as a qualifying condition to get your medical card as well. So if that's something that applies to you, by all means, use it when you are looking to get certified for a medical card. And then this is more of event news. The Illinois Cannabis Convention has announced its program schedule. NECAN announced the schedule for the 2024 convention. It's the 4th annual convention, and it'll run 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. May 31st and June 1st, Friday and Saturday. And it's going to host presenters like Jim Belushi, Illinois House of Representative Rep. LaShawn Ford, Deputy Director of Cannabis and Hemp David Lakeman, Alex Al-Sabah, Janie Dali Benavidez, Ambrose Jackson, Shawnee Williams, Victoria Williams, as well as more. You can stop by booth 221 as well to say hi to the Illinois News Joint team. I myself am going to try to get to NECAN this year. It's always tough for me with those Saturday shifts, and I've mentioned on the recent podcast episodes, if you haven't heard, listener, that I do have a newborn daughter, Violet, and taking care of her along with my wife, Gretchen, definitely is increasing my workload. So I'm trying to get to these cannabis events. I want to go to more of them, but I can't always make it work. I am going to try and get to NECAN this year, though, and Illinois News Joint will be there at booth 221. Lots of other good stuff going on there, other businesses, as also a job fair. So if you're interested in finding out more about legal cannabis in Illinois, or even exploring some possible new job opportunities or education or whatever, all of this is going to be at the Illinois Cannabis Convention, and NECAN, again, runs at the Schaumburg Convention Center, and it'll be running 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Friday the 31st and Saturday, June 1st. You can find out more information about all of those stories, as well as some different product reviews and other events that have happened or are coming up relating to cannabis in and around Illinois, all at IllinoisNewsJoint.com. And before I get into the other news stories, I wanted to talk about the cannabis strains of the week that I have been ingesting so far. I got some dog walkers, which I love. I've talked about these shorty joints before, and I got some other flower from the Wrigleyville Sunnyside, and I've been utilizing both of these. At the end of the day, after my work shift, and I get home and I check on Gretchen and Violet and make sure everything's good there after we eat dinner and everything, I've been going outside the building, down by the water, and I'll light up one of these dog walkers. And this strain is Sunset Sherbert. It's a 12-pack. I got it for $60. And for my money, it's still one of the best deals out there. Even though these are shorty joints, I find I only ever need one of them. It really sets me up in a good way. And with that price at 12 for $60, it runs at about $5 per joint here. The total THC percentage of the package is a little over 20.5%, and the harvest date is December 22nd. So it's a little further back than I usually like it, but I have not noticed any weirdness or differences there. Always with pre-rolls, I like to give a little roll between my thumb and forefinger to kind of break up the packed bud that's in there. You never know how these companies are rolling, and if you don't do that, I find that it does that canoeing kind of thing, or banana boat, whatever you want to call it, where it burns down like half of the joint, and then you're left like with a choice to try and break what's left up into a bowl, or try and stop the uneven burning, or just trash what's left or whatever. I hate kind of doing that, and so the best thing to do that I've found is just break apart those ground up buds by rolling the joint between your thumb and forefinger, and that tends to help out. The eighth of flower that I got is from the Simply Herb line of products. I love these because the price point for them is usually pretty fantastic. I got this eighth for $22. Now, when you buy in bulk, sometimes you can find better deals than that, but I wasn't seeing any bulk deals when I was over there, and so I went with this one. It was, again, from the Sunnyside in Wrigleyville, and the Simply Herb strain is apples and bananas. THC percentage is 19.63, and the harvest date is January 2nd. Also a bit further back than I typically like, but I gotta say, I didn't notice this as being particularly dry. It is a little soft and breaks apart a little easier in my hand than I typically like, and it's not sticky. It's powdery, if anything. So I'm not saying that this is something to run out and grab, but if you haven't tried Simply Herb at your local dispensary, try it out because their price points are usually pretty great, and I've never had any problems problems in terms of like mold or dryness or any weird tastes from when I'm ingesting their products. And as I always talk about, it's hard for me to recommend anything higher than these Dog Walker pre-rolls. I think the shorties are great. I think the price points are wonderful. And I love the branding. And I just think their little packages with the tiny pre-rolls in them, they're so convenient and they fit so well into a pocket. If you're going on like a camping trip or if you're just going to a concert or something, you buy one of these at the dispensary, you put the little tin in your pocket with your lighter, and you are good to go for the evening. Now for some more nationally focused news, I want to give an update to a story that I talked about last episode. There could be as many as 4 states that have cannabis initiatives on their ballots come November, and there were 2 of them that were still trying to gather enough signatures in order to make that happen. And one of those states has garnered enough signatures to make an initiative on this November 2024 ballot. That state would be South Dakota. The group behind the initiative to legalize recreational cannabis says they are confident that they have enough signatures to get their proposal on the November ballot for a public vote. And that group would be the South Dakotans for Better Marijuana Laws. They say they'll submit their signatures to the Secretary of State of South Dakota this week. And the group says they will submit well more than the 35,017 signatures required for the measure to be voted on during the November presidential election. Before the measure can be officially certified for the ballot, the state has to verify that enough of the signatures are from registered South Dakota voters. There's some more details and information lower down in this article. I have shared it below. By all means, it's from the Marijuana Herald, written by Anthony Martinelli. It came out May 6th. So by all means, check this out and read more for yourself. Another article that I wanted to share with you is from CannabisIndustryData.com. This is a site that I've been looking at more recently because they really delve into the nitty-gritty of the numbers regarding cannabis. And this article that they put out last week, May 8th, says U.S. adult use cannabis industry surpasses $20 billion with a B in total tax revenue. The United States adult use cannabis industry has generated over $20 billion in total tax revenue since first legal recreational cannabis purchase was made in Colorado on January 1st of 2014, just over 10 years ago. Think about that. I don't know where you live, listener, if you're in the U.S., if you're outside of it, if you're in a legal state or territory, or if it's not yet legal where you are, but 10 years ago, earlier this year in January, we passed that decade mark from when Colorado, the first state to create a legal recreational market for adults since they sold their first cannabis product. And in that 10 years' time, $20 billion in total tax revenue. We're not talking about profits for the companies. We're not talking about total revenue. We're talking about taxes in general across the states that have a legal market for adult recreational use. $20 billion in 10 years. Pretty freaking good, and that number is projected to go up. I've talked about that a lot. There is a state-by-state breakdown. You can see, for instance, Alaska, $28,097,114 in that time. Arizona, $257 million. California, over $1 billion just in California alone. $21 million for New York. Illinois is about $500 million, $552 million. And then there are many others as well. And total legal cannabis sales in the U.S., which is noted lower here, are expected to reach $31.5 billion this year, according to Whitney Economics. And in the coming years, this is what Whitney Economics has projected for legal cannabis sales in the U.S. This year, it's that $31.5 billion. Next year, $35.2 billion. In 2030, $67.2 billion. And by 2035, $87 billion. Those are the projections for legal cannabis sales in the U.S. from Whitney Economics over the next 11 years or so. And a recently released analysis from MJ Biz Daily said that the emerging legal cannabis industry in the U.S. is projected to add roughly $112 billion to the nation's economy this year, 2024. So I've talked about it a lot on the show. I've spelled it out a lot of different ways. The fact is, even though, some states and their markets may falter a bit, and I've talked about the specifics of those, you can check out past episodes if you want to hear me talk about kind of the supply-demand thing and competition and whether or not states opening the floodgates so that anyone can become a licensed dispenser of cannabis, whether that's good or bad for the future of their cannabis economies. But the fact is, no matter which way you slice it, the arrow for the legal cannabis revenues in the United States and around the world, it's only pointing one way, and that is up. And that brings me to the biggest news that I wanted to share with you. This came out earlier today. This is an article that I'm sharing from ABC News. I will share it below. This is an article from ABC News in Chicago. I have linked it below. You can follow along or read for yourself later. The headline reads, Justice Department formally moves to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug in historic shift. The plan, approved by Attorney General Merrick Garland, Niles West alum like myself. What's up, Merrick Garland? But ABC7 notes it does not legalize cannabis outright for recreational use. I believe that we're all aware of that the reclassification does not legalize cannabis, and I have said on the show many times and will continue to that the federal legalization of cannabis is not going to just make it so that it's legal everywhere. What they're going to do is end the prohibition, and they'll decriminalize it if it's any kind of federal stance at all, and that means that they'll just get out of the way and let states do what they want. As I mentioned earlier, that's what they've done with alcohol, and that's what I expect them to do with cannabis. But I'll continue with this article, which was published earlier today, May 16th, by Lindsay Whitehurst of the Associated Press. ABC Chicago goes on with this AP article saying, the Justice Department on Thursday formally moved to reclassify marijuana as a less dangerous drug in an historic shift in generations of U.S. drug policy. A proposed rule sent to the Federal Register recognizes the medical use of cannabis and acknowledges it has less potential for abuse than some of the nation's most dangerous drugs. The plan, approved by Attorney General Merrick Garland, does not legalize cannabis outright for recreational use, as they noted in the subheadline. The Drug Enforcement Administration, the DEA, will take public comment. We don't know when yet, but that public comment period will be very noteworthy. I can't wait for that. But they'll take that on the proposal to move cannabis away from its current classification as a Schedule I drug alongside heroin and LSD. It moves weed to Schedule III alongside ketamine and some anabolic steroids, along with, as I've said before, caffeine and Tylenol. The move comes after a recommendation from the Federal Health and Human Services Department, which launched a review of the drug's status at the urging of President Joe Biden in 2022. Biden has also moved to pardon thousands of people convicted federally of simple possession of cannabis and has called on governors and local leaders to take similar steps in states to erase convictions. In a video statement, the president said, quote, "This is monumental," calling it an important move toward reversing long-standing inequities. Quote, "Far too many lives have been upended because of a failed approach to marijuana, and I'm committed to righting these wrongs. You have my word on it," end quote. The election year announcement could help Biden, a Democrat, boost flagging support, particularly among younger voters. The notice of proposed rulemaking submitted to the Federal Register kicks off a 60-day comment period, followed by a possible review from an administrative judge, a potentially lengthy process. So I have said in past episodes that this could be done, this being the rescheduling, could be completed by the end of summer. But it sounds like if we have a 60-day public comment period, which is kicked off today after this Justice Department move, that means we are looking at July 16th for the end of that public comment period. And then a possible review from an administrative judge, which I would expect. And you should expect that too. And the reason that that's noteworthy is because there's no telling exactly how long that could take. The administrative judge could take it in, and then the next week they're done with their conclusions, and then it's over. But more likely, it could take a few months. And that means that maybe we get into the election season. Maybe it gets to September, October, November, before this rescheduling is officially in the books. So it's unfortunate because this really should be done by the end of summer. And I will say it is still possible that it could be. Come Labor Day, Come that first weekend in September, maybe we're celebrating Schedule 3 cannabis officially. But it's also possible that this lingers and this lags until after the election, which would be a real bummer. But either way, the article goes on. AP articles are typically pretty lengthy. There's a lot of good information down there. If you want to read the rest of it, by all means, go for it. But this is an historic step, and it is very exciting. So I wanted to bring that to you. We talked a few weeks ago about the DEA making that announcement. Very exciting stuff. Now, this public comment period is officially kicked off, and it's going for 60 days. And after that, we'll get the judge review, and rescheduling could become official sometime over these next few months, which is wonderful. But I'll tell you what is not so wonderful, and that is the propensity of some health influencers, and I'm saying that, listener, with air quotes, again, some of these health influencers that you see that are very popular on platforms like YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, some of these people have absolutely no clue what they're talking about, especially where cannabis is concerned. And the reason I'm bringing this up to you is because I am talking about one specific influencer in particular, and this man's name is Andrew Huberman. Now, maybe you've seen this guy on YouTube. I feel like I see clips from his podcast all the time that get shared on Reddit, that get shared on YouTube Shorts, that get shared on Instagram and TikTok and all of the like. Huberman is a neuroscientist. He does teach at Stanford. The guy has been educated, but he is so obviously out of his depth whenever he talks about cannabis. Now, this article originally comes from Rolling Stone, but I'm getting at it through Yahoo Life, and I've linked that article below. You can follow along if you want to, but I'll just go through a little bit of it here. The headline reads, "Word Salad. Andrew Huberman's cannabis claims slammed by experts." And my issues with the word slammed in a headline aside, this article comes from Miles Klee and was published May 8th. I'll read the first part of it here. Andrew Huberman is such a successful podcaster and wellness guru that his most devoted male followers are known by a teasing nickname, Huberman Husbands. But when recording his show, Huberman Lab, Huberman has plenty that an influential podcasting superstar like, say, Joe Rogan doesn't. Mainly a PhD in neuroscience and a position at Stanford University School of Medicine as an associate professor of neurobiology. It is these credentials that lend Huberman a voice of authority, even as he has strayed far from his fields of specialty, which are ophthalmology and visual systems, to become a generalist for his millions of listeners, covering topics that range from dreams and dopamine to meditation and nutrition. He is positioned as an all-around expert who can distill some of the most complex questions in science into accessible explainers for the curious. But the result, so says Miles Klee, can be an oversimplification or outright miscommunication that leads to charges of pseudoscience, as when he recently shared a video about the effects of cannabis on X. Yahoo notes X is known formerly as Twitter. I've stopped making that disclaimer because I think by now we all know that X is the new, stupider name for Twitter that we're all forced to call it. Although I do enjoy still calling it Twitter from time to time because, again, that's what we know it as. The 20-minute clip comes from a nearly 3-hour episode of Huberman Lab, originally released in 2022. Outside that context and free-floating on social media, this content attracted the ire of those who specifically study cannabis and its effects on the brain and body. The video includes claims about the supposed differences between sativa and indica variants of cannabis, the mechanisms by which cannabinoid compounds interact with the nervous system, and how the drug alters memory and appetite that experts tell Rolling Stone are either misleading or inaccurate. On Twitter, Huberman appeared to stand by these assertions, but encouraged critics to submit feedback via a portal on his show's website. A representative also replied to a request for comment with sources Huberman had used in preparing the episode. "Does anyone know what drug he's talking about?" tweeted Peter Grinspoon, a physician, medical cannabis specialist at Massachusetts General Hospital, instructor at Harvard Medical School, and author of Seeing Through the Smoke, a cannabis expert untangles the truth about marijuana, in quote tweeting the video. It can't possibly be marijuana/cannabis, he goes on. Little of this is true. Grinspoon concluded that Huberman needs to find better experts to advise him on the topic. The entire show, Grinspoon tells Rolling Stone, was not only full of, quote, outdated anti-cannabis stereotypes about users watching cartoons and gorging on pizza, but contained errors of fact. He takes issue, for example, with Huberman's claim that cannabis will, quote, almost always cause memory deficits, including long-term memory problems. Quote, it can sometimes transiently affect some types of short-term memory at high doses for some people, Grinspoon says. The quote goes on, it doesn't cause any long-term deficits. He also adds that, contrary to Huberman's description, it, quote, doesn't shut down the hippocampus, a component of the brain important for memory functions. Matthew Hill, a PhD in behavioral neuroscience and professor at University of Calgary's Cummings School of Medicine, who has studied the endocannabinoid system, a transmitter network in humans that's directly affected by cannabis, for more than 2 decades. He had strong words for Huberman when he saw the video segment making the rounds on Twitter. Quote, holy fucking shit. It is actually disturbing how inaccurate the overwhelming majority of what is said here is, he tweeted. Speaking to Rolling Stone, Hill says that he listened to the original Huberman Lab episode when it came out and had forgotten how egregious some of it was. Quote, it's not even that it's misrepresenting the facts, he says. He was just kind of saying stuff. There isn't research on this. End quote. Hill is dismayed that Huberman is now the celebrity face of neuroscience, despite others in the discipline being fed up with how he oversteps available data to weave a compelling story. It drives the majority of us insane. I mean, you go to any neuroscience conference, when someone mentions Huberman's name, everyone sighs and rolls their eyes. Hill says that when he gives talks to the general public on neuroscience, he frequently has to disabuse audience members of falsehoods they got from Huberman's podcast. Hill goes on, one of the problems with Huberman's style, he says, is that he uses unscientific language to advance unsupported ideas, which can make it more difficult to debunk. When explaining, for instance, how cannabis stimulates appetite, causing the infamous munchies, Yahoo says, Huberman refers to how the brain experiences an anticipation of taste. It so happens that Hill is currently researching what cannabis does to appetite in the lab with rats and a vapor model chamber system he likens to a, quote, Cheech and Chong hotbox. Love that. He says that while even rats that have just eaten become ravenous again when intoxicated, we can't yet say anything definitive about the mechanism responsible. Quote, I've never heard a scientist talk like this, Hill says of Huberman's anticipation explanation. If you peel it back, how would you test that question? Besides, he says, there's virtually no existing research on the munchies in humans. Hill describes such Huberman-isms as, quote, word salad. So does Grinspoon, who adds, quote, I don't know what it means, and it doesn't make any sense. Also critical of Huberman's terminology is Linda Klumpers, a University of Vermont clinical pharmacologist, partner with consulting firm Verdient Science, and founder and director of the cannabis research and education organization Canify. What a great name, by the way, Canify. I want everyone to canify their lives. That's literally what I think of when I hear that name. Introducing cannabis into your life and canify your life. That's going to be my advice to people going forward. But Dr. Klumpers goes on here and she says, Huberman uses jargon and phrases that are related to how cannabis compounds work, so it might sound impressive and legitimate. But what he actually has to say with these words is false, Klumpers says. She also criticizes his use of the antiquated word marijuana as opposed to cannabis. Hey, Dr. Klumpers, she's singing my song. I love this. I've been saying it from the rooftops and everyone's telling me, hey, you're crazy. No one's going to call it cannabis. People are only going to call it marijuana. Well, Dr. Klumpers agrees with me, and thank you. I love Canify, and I love cannabis as opposed to marijuana. And Dr. Klumpers goes on to say, noting that marijuana is associated with stigma, not scientific. Nor is his reference to different strains of cannabis rather than varieties of the plant scientifically accurate. So anyway, this article from Rolling Stone and Yahoo goes on into way more detail, but the whole reason I'm bringing this up to you and why I wanted to say this is because Huberman is not the only cannabis, health and wellness guru out there. There are lots of these people, especially on YouTube. They have podcasts and they use language that makes them sound legitimate, and they have credentials that they lean on to try and give them credibility. And they do, but it doesn't mean that they're credible outside their fields of education. That's the real key here. And when you hear someone like Huberman talking about cannabis, a topic that he knows nothing about, and there are people like Dr. Matthew Hill, and like Dr. Linda Klumpers, and like Dr. Peter Grinspoon. These people are actually studying the plant and have for decades. They know what they're talking about. Just because Huberman teaches at Stanford and has a very popular podcast does not mean that he knows anything about cannabis. And I think those of us who have used it for ourselves have noticed some of the word salad that he comes up with. And you can hear the stigma that still exists in him, someone who does not use cannabis. You can hear that with how he comes at the topic. But even so, his credibility and his popularity tend to sway people's opinions in his direction. And I'm telling you that anytime you see any clip or read any quotes or hear somebody referencing Huberman relating to cannabis, you can toss that word salad right out the fucking window, because this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And if you didn't already know that in terms of what advice you take from YouTube health influencers, know it for certain regarding the topic of cannabis at the very least. And honestly, the less people are watching YouTube doctors like Huberman and these others, the better off we'll all be. And on that note, the notion of influencers, and I say again with air quotes, the notion of them, their knowledge and their behaviors, and kind of our current little, period that we have here as a society where we have idolized them and put them up on this pedestal where, because they think of some hack in the kitchen where you're using rhubarb to clean your countertops, that all of a sudden makes you an expert on, exercise or nutrition in general. And I think that is kind of what the article about Huberman was getting to. But there's another example here that I really had to bring to your attention. There is a vegan influencer who is also big in the cannabis space, apparently. I am not familiar with this woman. She goes by VP on YouTube, and she often broadcasts herself smoking cannabis while driving, and she is in the LA area. She's around Los Angeles, which, God, I mean, driving and doing YouTube videos while you're doing that in Los Angeles already sounds like a freaking terrible idea. But then you add smoking cannabis to that, and it sounds like a real mess. And you might imagine where this is going, but this woman, VP, while she was live streaming herself driving through Los Angeles and smoking cannabis, she ran someone over. And there it is on her video, and I'm going to play the audio for you right now because it is objectively freaking hilarious, and it just illustrates so perfectly why nobody should be doing this. I don't care what kind of, connoisseur you are. I love cannabis, and I ingest it all the time, and I would never dream of streaming myself, smoking or ingesting that while I was driving. And then this woman getting her comeuppance right in this same video. It's just hilarious. So listen for yourself and we'll kind of go through it afterward.
No, he does hear those voices. They're not fake, but I wonder sometimes. Oh my God, are you okay?
No. What the fuck did you do?
I didn't see her.
Why are you not looking?
I was looking. I didn't see you.
What the fuck? Right here.
I'm telling you, I did not see you.
Okay, Ann? What the fuck?
Just tell me how I can help.
Well, I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
Where's my phone?
Okay. Oh my God, you guys. I don't know what just happened, but it wasn't good. I'm trying to... Where do you want me to go? Can I park? Can I park? All right, guys, here's your content for the day.
Yeah, there it is. Here's your content for the day. She literally just hit somebody, a pedestrian, while driving in Los Angeles. You can hear that bump, you can hear the screams, and you can hear the reactions. And I just gotta say, this is the type of shit that keeps cannabis down in people's minds. This is the type of shit that really sets us back an unfortunate amount. I mean, I guarantee you that there are publications that are going to run with this and be like, look, this is the typical cannabis user. And I wanted to bring up, she actually went live again later, showing people that not only had she not been arrested, but she was free to just keep making content like that. She says it was really scary. And she said that the accident happened due to the sun blinding her and had nothing to do with any drug use or looking at chat while driving. And she goes, you can go look at the stream. I was not even looking at chat. And as the chat filled with questions regarding the hit, VP claimed the police let her go. She said, quote, I'm blessed because I decided to not be a piece of shit. The cop literally told me, just so you know, I know how hard that was. Do you know how many hit and runs we have out here? She also alleged the pedestrian that had been hit was, quote, fine, and that she wasn't worried about being sued due to having insurance. The article from Dexerto.com, which I have linked below, ends with the line, while cannabis is legal in California, driving under the influence of drugs is a crime. End quote, end of article. I definitely think that you should watch this video for yourself, just to kind of see the expressions. Those are pretty funny. But I just gotta say, again, don't do this, okay? I don't care how much you love cannabis. I love it too. Don't be a fucking idiot out there. Don't drive while you're smoking. You're going to just get yourself in trouble. You're risking it. I don't care how much you love doing it while driving. The fact is, as legal as cannabis might be in your state, you can always still be pulled over for it. You can be fined. You can even go to jail. So it's not worth it. And for God's sake, if you're going to do it, don't fucking live stream yourself while you're doing it. I mean, the fact that this person isn't in jail is pretty remarkable. And maybe she will end up, going or getting some consequences later on. Thankfully, she says anyway, the pedestrian was fine. The police apparently confirmed that. I'm sure that there will be a lawsuit coming, but don't stream and drive, and definitely don't stream and smoke and drive. Really taking distracted driving to a whole nother level here. And I love the frustration coming from her where she was kind of like, can I park? Can I park?
I plan on it. Can I park? Can I park?
Very much a little Dana Carvey there. I think he's doing Ross Perot. And can I finish? Can I finish? Can I finish? Can I finish? Can I park? Can I park? Can I park? I do love the entitlement there where you just hit a pedestrian. You know that you are totally caught after smoking and streaming yourself. You know it's all there on the internet, and you're still kind of giving attitude to people like, hey, what's your problem, man? I'm just trying to park here. I'm just going through my day. This is exactly the opposite of the kind of footage and content that we as cannabis enthusiasts want to be put out there. Because I don't care how much you love it, this type of shit is going to set the cannabis community back. There are going to be publications that use this, and they're going to run with this for the next several months while the public comment period is going and the Justice Department's considering rescheduling, and potentially, however these presidential elections go in November, maybe the White House and maybe Congress might be considering decriminalizing this. And now we've got this footage of a streamer who hits somebody because she's driving while using cannabis, and to say nothing of the fact that she is engaging with online viewers cars and stuff while she's doing that too. Oh, a whole heaping helping of bad right in there. But people are going to blame the cannabis. And that's the part of it that really bothers me about this. So don't do that. Definitely get a good laugh, though. I certainly will as I continue viewing this. And, just try and be wise out there. Remember that the ways in which we use cannabis, especially on camera, if you're a content creator or just somebody who engages online at all, just think about the message that you're putting out there when you're using cannabis, especially when you're doing it live, like if you're live streaming or making a video. Consider the message and the impact that whatever you're doing might send on the people viewing it. And if it's something that you wouldn't want your niece or nephew to do, if it's something you wouldn't want your kid doing or your younger sibling or something like that, someone you care about, if you would advise them not to do the thing that you're about to do, take your own advice and don't do it. It's as simple as that. And maybe you feel differently about that. Maybe you're a big fan of smoking while driving. I do, I don't really drive much anymore. My wife and I, we live in Chicago, take public transit a lot. I'll rent cars when we're leaving the state or the area or whatever, but I don't own a car. We don't deal with driving on a regular day-to-day basis. I remember, loving smoking a joint before a long drive, and I totally get that. What's your opinion on cannabis use and driving? Are you a fan of it? Is it something you believe that nobody should do? We know it's against the law, but I'm not asking about that. I'm asking your personal opinion about it. Is it something you like doing? Is it something you would never do? Where do you stand on cannabis use and driving? Text in, click that Text the Cannabis Man link in the description notes and let me know how you feel about that or anything else you want to touch on from this episode. If you do text in, let me know which episode you're listening to and when, and that'll help me figure out what it is you're talking about. But by all means, continue to enjoy your cannabis and celebrate the news from today that the Justice Department has kicked off the public comment period. I'll be back again with more details on that next week. I'll tell you how you can get involved in that and more. And of course, I will have more news stories and perspective for you relating to cannabis. Be sure to follow the show at C-Man Podcast on X and Instagram, and it's the Cannabis Man Podcast Facebook page and YouTube channel. Become a subscriber by clicking the support the show link down below, and be sure to leave a rating or review if you liked this show or you like what I'm doing here. Whatever platform you're using, do me a favor and rate and review the show. It helps me stand out from the crowd out there. Enjoy yourself out there this weekend. Spend time with those you love. If you can, get outside, touch some grass, feel the sun on your face, inhale some fresh air along with the cannified air if you like. And I'll be back again next week with another episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. Bye-bye. Cannabis Man is 100% originally crafted by myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music written and composed by Yusu Kim, aka Goodson.